Could you speak an alien language, like actually speak an alien language? Or even better, could an alien communicate in English? If an extraterrestrial showed up tomorrow, could you have a conversation with it? Not via some fancy technology or a translator, but actually sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with it. Could you go to school and learn how to speak an alien language in the same way you might learn French, German, or terrestrial? When you think about it, there's three central questions we're trying to answer here. Firstly, how do we communicate? Secondly, how would an alien communicate? And thirdly, what is the overlap between the two? You might have heard a widely known fact that communication is 90% non-verbal. But that widely known fact isn't actually true. It all started with the release of this old book by Albert Mehrabian called Non-Verbal Communication. In it, there's this interesting line where he talks about communication and he articulates that 55% of it is non-verbal, or the way your face looks. 38% is the way you say something, and only 7% is actually the words you say. But when you dig a little deeper and you look around that section, you realize he was asking a different question. He wasn't talking about communication in general. He was talking about communicating your feelings. When you're communicating you're happy, you don't say, I'm happy. You smile. It's visual. Well, you might say, yes, I'm happy. But then I wouldn't believe you because you don't sound happy. And that's one of the things I learned while doing this research. Human communication not only has a lot to do with the words you say, but how you say it. And sometimes the way you say it can override the actual words that are coming out of your mouth. I'm going to share a short clip of me saying ba and va, and I want you to pay special attention to my mouth, the way I'm saying the words. Ba, 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 ba. Now this is going to blow your mind. I promise you, all the sounds you were hearing were exactly the same. It was always me going ba. But your eyes were overriding what you were seeing. So much so that you were literally hearing something different. To prove it to you, I'm going to play the two clips again, side by side. And I want you to look between the two and watch what I say change, not based on how it actually sounds, but actually which clip you're looking at. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, so now you know that communication isn't mostly non-verbal. So the question is, how do humans communicate? Humans have developed ways of communicating through all of our senses, but we prioritize how something looks and sounds. But we do know how to communicate using other senses. There's a communication style called protactile that only uses touch. So the follow-up question to this is, how would an alien communicate? What senses would they use? And are there any other ways of communicating that humans cannot do or sense? This is where it gets interesting because we have to speculate what an alien might or might not be able to do. And to be perfectly honest, given the size of the universe and the number of potentially aliens out there, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the ideas we have are true. But that aside, I don't want to make the same mistake I think a lot of authors make when creating aliens. I'm going to introduce you to a new word, anthropocentric, which is the tendency for humans to think in human terms. It's really hard for us to think and look at the world without using our human eyes. I personally hate when you meet an alien in a book and they're not alien. They're basically just humans with an extra arm or two. I love the idea of making aliens actually alien. If you're interested in reading a book like that, there is a book in the description called A New Eden. It's worth a quick listen. The release date is today, so you might be one of the first people to ever read it. So what are some of the ways aliens could communicate that we couldn't even dream of? Sci-fi authors love to use animals as the inspiration for a lot of aliens. So are there any animals that can communicate in ways that our senses cannot even detect? To find out, I started by looking at the 10 smartest animals on the planet, and there are quite a few that communicate differently. Researching this, I found that octopus actually communicate using colors and textures and gestures. If an alien, for example, communicated like this, we might learn to read what they are saying, but never be able to communicate back to them in the same language. But are there any animals that communicate in ways that we can't comprehend? Funny enough, there's plenty. Giraffes, for example, communicate at frequencies our ears can't detect. So if an alien communicated at the frequencies giraffes do, they could be having a conversation right in front of us and we wouldn't be able to understand or hear them. Spiders are another example of animals that communicate in ways that we would not be able to understand. They use subtle vibrations along their web, and there's no way we would be able to interpret any of that. What about some of the ways we can communicate that don't actually have an animal equivalent? I can think of a couple. What about if an alien thought 100 times faster than us? Then they could be having a conversation right in front of us and we don't even have time to process it all. Having a conversation with a human would feel like talking in slow motion. Or how about if an alien thought fundamentally different from us? One of the biggest challenges with human language is just how inefficient it is. It relies heavily on a shared pool of meaning. I use this example in my book if you want to go check it out. But basically, in human language, if you were describing a hammer, you would always describe a simplified version of this hammer. There's absolutely no way in the human language for me to quickly describe this hammer in a way that you understand exactly what it looks like, especially if you don't have a reference point for what a hammer is. Now imagine an alien whose communication method was extremely efficient. Imagine if an alien had the ability to live stream exactly what they were seeing into another person's mind. I think in a lot of ways, if an alien communicated like that, humans would really struggle to have a decent conversation with them. The best analogy I could think of is human language is very compressed, whereas what I just described, it would be an uncompressed form of language. At this point, you're probably thinking aliens and humans would be so different from one another, and it would be almost impossible for us to have a conversation in a shared language. But, and this is the important part of the story, humans are smart. And if an alien was powerful enough to come visit us, they might even be smarter than us. And if you put two smart beings together, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to figure out a way to communicate. We can see that humans and aliens would have to make a concerted effort finding the common areas where our senses can detect what the other species is trying to communicate. And depending on the species, that overlap might be quite small or massive. I think it would be hardest for us to communicate with the alien species that primarily relied on pheromones for its communication, like ants, or use tiny vibrations and subtle movements in order to communicate like spiders. But then again, humans are adaptable, and we have been known to communicate in different ways. There's reports of blind people using machines that draw subtle patterns on their backs in order to draw the world around them. And these people are learning to see, not through their eyes, but through the subtle changes and patterns on their back. So let's go all the way back to the central question of this video. Could you speak an alien language? Could you speak to an alien without the use of a translator? The simple answer would be yes, eventually. But it probably wouldn't be in English. It would probably be in a language designed specifically for us two species, and it would probably involve them and us using different means of communicating. We might use sounds and gestures, whereas they might use color changing skin and patterns. Now honestly, if you like this video, go check out this book. It's a hard sci-fi novel, and one of the central questions in it is, how would you actually communicate with an alien that was, well, alien? It's a fascinating journey through space, and a lot of the ideas that I shared with you in the video are actually research I did for this book.